Hi, and welcome back to our study of Holy Week, day by day. This is our second video for Thursday. In the first video, we looked at the Last Supper. Now we're going to look at the events that followed the Last Supper with Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is found in Luke 22, verses 39 through 46. Coming out, Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, and, and as was his custom, his disciples also followed him. When he came to this place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter into temptation." And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done." Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly than his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. When he rose up from prayer, he came to his disciples, found them sleeping, and said to them, "Why do you sleep? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation." Um, Jesus' prayer here is found in all the Gospels. Uh, John 17 goes into more detail of that prayer. And I encourage you to take a look at John 17. I want to pull just one verse out of John 17, and that's the third verse. And Jesus said, "This is eternal life, that they may know you, the one true God, and your Son, Jesus Christ, whom you sent." See, what the prayer in the garden really is a struggle for our eternity. And we see the beginning of this struggle as Jesus separates himself out from his disciples in the 26th chapter of Matthew. Really shows how Jesus set the 8 disciples. Judas had already left the scene. Uh, he sets the 8 down and tells them to pray, watch and pray. And then he takes Peter, James, and John a little further with him and sets them down and says, "Watch and pray." And then himself, he goes alone and prays. And this is not only Jesus separating himself out from his disciples, but he's being separated from God because of our sin. And that's really what's taking place when Jesus says, "Take this cup from me." It's not so much the cup of death, but is the cup that God is forsaking him because the sins of the world are being poured into him. Uh, the Old Testament tells us that he who dies on a tree is cursed by God. And that's what we're seeing here, that Jesus is literally going to be cursed with our sin. And because of sin, God will withdraw himself from fellowship with Jesus. He will be forsaken for our sakes because God cannot abide sin. He is holy. And Jesus says, "Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done." This really shows us how we should be praying. So many times we're asking God to do things for us. And really what our prayers need to be is how we can join God doing his will. And this is such an eternal struggle that Christ sweats drops of blood, and God sends angels to minister and strengthen him. And I think Paul summed up this whole thing best in his second letter to the Corinthian church, where he wrote, "For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him." Jesus knew no sin. He didn't sin. But he became sin, literally had our sin poured into him, so that we might be redeemed and reconciled back to God. And that is our prayer for you through these videos as we study, that you might come to accept Christ's atonement for your own life. I hope that you join us tomorrow as we look at Good Friday.